Wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2410 of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast from FanGraphs presented by our Patreon supporters. I am Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, not joined today by Meg Rowley, who is traveling, but will rejoin me next week from the winter meetings. And so later on this episode, I will be continuing the intermittent, sporadic baseball jobs series, bringing it back by talking to a very long-time batting practice pitcher, John Yandel, who has been throwing batting practice for the Giants for 41 seasons and counting ever since 1985. I love talking to octogenarians and nonagenarians, sometimes even centenarians. So a septuagenarian is nothing but 71. That's how old John is. Is pretty old in batting practice pitcher years. But first, joining me is a fellow who has been following the Giants for roughly as long as John has been throwing batting practice to them. Co-host emeritus and pebble hunting Substack proprietor, Sam Miller. Welcome back, Sam.
Thanks, Ben. How are you?
Doing well. Also with us at the start of this segment is official Effectively Wild scorekeeper Chris Hannell. Hello, Chris.
Hello. Very happy to be back.
So I don't know exactly why you're back. I know roughly that you have something to share with us.
You have a habit of just trusting me and being like, hey, yeah, okay, come and explain whatever madness it is that you've discovered.
Yeah, hasn't steered us wrong so far, but you told me something about a draft that Sam and I did a decade ago that is now concluded, I suppose. Well, the draft concluded a decade ago, but the results now are official, cemented.
Yes.
And so you are here to tell us how we did and also tell us what we did, because I don't actually know.
Well, as listeners know, we brought it up on the preseason predictions game episode. We're working on ewstats.com to build out the whole entire history of all past competitions. And I was going through the Google Sheet that my predecessor, John Chenier, kept, and noticed that there was a draft that was made on episode 669, where both of you did, I think it was like the second or third iteration of drafting under 25 starting pitchers.
Right.
And you drafted 10 pitchers apiece, and you were basically tracking them over the next 5 and 10 years. In this iteration, you used WARP as your metric, and 2025 was the final year of that draft. And so we now get to know the winners. Now, this is the interesting thing. 2023 was last year that John had been tracking, and at the time, Ben, you were leading 57.65 to Sam's 53.15.
I love that he went out to the second decimal place.
And in those next 2 years, so Ben, you had a lead of about 4 WARP. You then gained another 2 and change, and Sam gained about 1.7.
Yeah, I'm looking at my team, and since 2023, everybody has either retired or should have. So,
well, I can now announce that based on that, because Ben had a lead and then extended it, the winner is Sam Miller.
I think I see what happened here.
Yes, Sam wins by a score of 65 to 62.8 because WARP calculations have changed a great deal. And so...
all part of the plan, all part of the process. You do have to trust the process.
And I even went back and listened to the episode. And Ben, you were talking about how WARP had just changed, and you have this back and forth about, no, new WARP is better. I am not making this draft based on these calculations of WARP. But I don't think that you counted on WARP changing this much in the interim. And so Ben goes from a final score of 60.85 to 62.8. Sam goes from 54.85 to 65.
Wow.
A full 10 WARP plus change for your team. Yeah.
Can you remind us of who our teams were? Because I haven't the slightest idea.
Sam's draft board was Jake Odorizzi, Archie Bradley, Aaron Sanchez, who went up 4 WARP by the new calculations. Eddie Butler went up by 4. Kyle Hendricks went up by 1.8. Mike Lorenzen went up by 2.5. Rafael Montero stayed right where he was. Kendall Graveman went down a little bit. Trevor May went down by 2. Kyle Lobstein went up by 1. And Erasmo Ramirez was on your draft board.
Hey, that team stinks.
Ben's board was Carlos Martinez, who took the biggest hit out of everybody. In the new calculation, he lost 6.4 warp from what he was originally had. Now, when I say what he originally had, John was basically capturing the warp at the end of each season and was going by that. So it's not just, it was a whole range of different warp calculations that are being normalized to 2025. So Carlos Martinez, Trevor Bauer, Taiwan Walker, Jesse Hahn, AJ Cole, Daniel Norris, Tim Cooney, TJ House, Tyler Matzik.
These names, I'm just like, who?
Yeah, Anthony Desclafani, who gained 6 warp in the new calculations, and Nick Martinez, who gained 2.23.
Wow, Tim Cooney. I drafted Tim Cooney. He didn't pitch after that season.
This is definitely remembering some guys. That's all I can say about that.
That's the best I could do. Wow,
Nick, the last player picked, it looks like, is Nick Martinez, and he is by far the best one still going. And he left the country for half of this time.
Yeah. Nick Martinez is the only player in this draft to earn 1 warp in 2025.
Oh,
gosh. And now I'm wondering what the best we could have done is, which I'm sure you haven't calculated, but if we could retroactively
I'm going to now. Yes.
Yeah. Well, if you want to figure it out after this and update me, and I'll say it on the outro, but the ideal team that we could have drafted to maximize our warp back then, because I'm sure we could have done a lot better than we did. Tim Cooney, my goodness.
So that there's the theoretical, like if you had been able to draft players that you didn't even know existed yet.
Yeah.
And then there's the one that's, okay, these are active players that are under 25, who you would have known about.
Yeah, I guess the latter. Probably not someone who was like, I don't know, 16 back then and just had a great debut year this past season or something.
Yeah. I think if either one of you had said Tarek Skubal in 2015, that would have been a very weird choice.
Yeah. I assume that these players had to have been active for us to draft them. We couldn't draft prospects or something like that. Did we specify?
I don't know, but I'm going to assume that was the case given the list that you had here.
Yeah, I think probably that was what we did.
Do you know that phenomenon that probably everybody has mentioned in conversation, where anything that has happened since March 2020 feels like it happened like 3 weeks ago, and anything that happened like February 2020 or before feels like it happened several centuries ago?
Yes.
All of these guys aged 20 years in the last 10 years. Like, there is no way that Trevor May, there's just no way that Trevor May was under 25 10 years ago. There's like no way that Carlos Martinez is currently under 35, which by definition he must be, but I think they all aged 20 years in 10 years.
Tim Cooney turns 35 in about 15 days. He's December 19th will be his 35th birthday. So
what is he doing?
I have no idea.
Can we call him?
Yeah. Cold call Tim Cooney. Ask him if he's as surprised as I am that I drafted him 10 years ago. Wow. So we don't actually have the full 10-year data set for legacy warp, right? Because we just don't have how warp was calculated then. And also John has not been tracking it the last couple of years. So you added, or you know what it was a couple of years ago, and then you have recalculated, but we don't know. Yeah. I wonder if warp had never changed. Maybe I would have retained my lead, but I guess I failed to anticipate it's changing.
This is the thing I was going to mention. I did happen to reach out to Craig Goldstein, and I'm going to see if I can get those numbers.
Yeah, it's probably not still calculated, I would guess. But
but if we can get the formulas, if we can get that, and then I can be like, we can run the stats for, we can reverse engineer what the warp would have been based on these stats.
I'm sure that'll be worth the time that it takes the stats team at Baseball Prospectus. But I guess I have Jonathan Judge or other folks on the stats team there to blame for sabotaging my team, which might have come out ahead if not for those refinements. But That's the risk you take with ever-evolving stats.
If I'm reading this right, in the first 2 rounds of this draft, we had like twice as much player value. Like you in your first pick was Clayton Kershaw, who had a pretty nice career.
Not bad. Yeah.
So Kershaw is on here, and Chris Sale, and Strasburg, and Madison Bumgarner in the first round, and then like the second round we had Garrett Cole and Nathan Eovaldi. I mean, Nathan Eovaldi is way better than any of the pitchers who were in the third round. Zach Wheeler, who
you had Sonny Gray.
Yes, Sonny Gray. So I got to tell you too, like we've drafted 3 players who have passed away. I was not expecting. Yeah. I guess I just wasn't expecting that to be a thing. Like, that's depressing.
Yeah. I did not factor that into my projections. Yeah.
That's a level of slog to rigor mortis that I don't know if I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Well, from Kershaw to Cooney, couple great lefties on my squads.
All right, Ben, who's your first pick?
If we were to redo this now.
Yeah, well, let's run it back.
Yeah. Haven't done any prep on that, but I'd like to think we could do better this time than that third time at least.
I thought that Harry Pavlidis did it with us once too. No?
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I think.
But I don't see him on here.
That does sound familiar. Now I'm going to look because there's so many tabs to this.
Yeah, I think he did something with us at least one time.
September 6, 2013. Ben, Harry, and Sam drafted best under 90 mile per hour starting rotations.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. As soon as you got halfway through that, I remembered it.
Yeah.
And how's that going?
Well, that one was only for a year. So that was decided in 2014. Harry won 3.39, Ben 2.73, Sam 1.6.
That's old warp. Do it again.
Recalculate. We'd have a tough time doing a under 90 mile per hour draft in 2025. Slim pickings.
All position players pitching.
Wait, you're using midseason milestone. You started in September 2013, which makes it harder to get with BP's system.
Yeah, we'd have to get retroactive day by day warp calculations.
Yeah. Although based on the margins here, I think Harry still got it because he had Travis Wood at 1.88. And Ben Lindbergh had Mark Burley at 2.21, but also had Marco Estrada at negative 1.45.
Ben, do you realize that we drafted guys who wouldn't get Tommy John?
Right. R.A. Dickey. Did anyone pick him? That was a good pick. But
Doug's first pick. Yeah, Doug Thorburn was in that draft, and that was his first pick. And
smart.
Yeah.
Ben had Doug Fister, Mark Burley, Dan Herron, Jaime Garcia, Marco Estrada. Sam had R.A. Dickey, Bronson Arroyo, A.J. Griffin, Jason Vargas, and Wandy Rodriguez. Harry had Jared Weaver, Travis Wood, Dylan G, John Danks, and Tyler Skaggs.
Okay. Well, thanks for reminding us of some pitchers who used to pitch and also of some pretty bad draft picks that we made. This has reduced my own opinion of my projection skills. Not that I have a high opinion of my ability to forecast the future, but thank you in absentia to John Chenier for his years of record keeping, and to you, Chris, for keeping the flame alive.
I did reach out to John and let him know what was about to happen, and he thought that was the funniest outcome, which we both agree is the best.
Okay, well, while we are talking about things we did a decade of that we're probably prouder of than
actually
those draft results.
Ben, that's a good segue.
Oh, okay.
I was watching a video that you were in recently with Vince Gilligan.
Yes.
And, buddy, you are ripped. When did that start coming together?
I guess, I don't know, gradually, not recently, I guess. I've been working out.
I remember that at Stomper Summer, which was a decade ago, you were like doing more than me, but you were still like, you were a lean, you were
slimmer then.
You were still part of the corduroy crew or whatever it was. Like you definitely fit in more with the writers than the ball players.
Yeah.
You were eating chickpeas. I remember that out of the can.
Yes.
So the only people who are working out actively, only strength trainers eat garbanzo beans out of the can. But I was not expecting. I mean, the traps traps, the biceps. I saw you, and you know what I said?
What?
I said, he looks sexy. Have you seen that body?
Wow. Thank you.
Does that work as a callback? Do you recognize that?
No. Is that about a stomper?
No. In January 2023, you and Meg talked about two players tweeting within 20 minutes of each other, or not tweeting, but telling beat reporters within 20 minutes of each other that their teammates had shown up to camp. Did I say January? I think I said it's spring of 2023. They both
like
said
the new best shape of your life.
Exactly. And with it, they had used the exact same words. He looks sexy. Have you seen that body?
Yeah.
Anyway, so how do you do it? What's your routine?
Well, I guess just the usual, lifting heavy things and eating a lot of protein, lots of chicken.
Do you have a trainer? Do you do it on your own?
Do it on my own.
What'd you do today? What heavy things did you lift today?
Nothing, my mouse today so far, but the day is young for me, at least, because I'm kind of nocturnal. There's a little gym in the basement of my building.
Okay.
It's an old building, but it's a decent little setup. So I just go down there often in the dead of night. Are you
more like dumbbells, machines, or body weight?
All of the above, really. But yeah, if you want to put on some size, I guess more than body weight is helpful, probably. So
well, congratulations. I started doing exercise for the first time 3 years ago, and I started too late. I believe it's too late for me.
No, it's never too late.
Nothing has changed. I work out every day, and nothing has changed except for I do feel that my body is stronger. Like I have a different sense of balance. My core is engaged in daily activities. I like that, but I think I'm too old to get as big as you.
I don't think so. I don't think it's ever too late, but you might have to eat vast quantities of food, which I'm good at, but not everyone is. Also, do you still walk many miles a day?
I stopped walking because I replaced it with this other exercise time.
Okay, I was going to say because that could hurt your gains. You know, if you're walking too much. Not that walking is bad. Walking is good.
Do you still eat all your food in a 2-hour period every day?
No, no. I eat throughout the day and night, but I do more high intensity cardio than sort of distance or durability, I guess.
So my recollection was that you would have. Let me see if I can. Okay, you would get. Don't correct me until I'm done.
Okay.
You would get a 3-egg omelet, some sort of chicken wrap, and like the salmon from the diner. Am I close?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
You don't need more that way.
Yeah.
You ate the same thing every day for several years in a row. The exact same thing.
Diner servers are often taken aback by the size of my order. So
I was taken aback by the size of your traps.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think I didn't expect this detour, but I appreciate it. I guess I've made some gains in the past decade, so that's heartening to hear. Which is good because my ego needed the boost after that little Tim Cooney recap. I did.
You are in better shape than Tim Cooney right now.
You never know. Who knows what Tim Cooney's up to?
All right. Really, so what were you going to say? 10-year project. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to talk about the book we wrote that summer and revisiting that because we have recently gotten a couple questions about it and they are similar. Patreon supporter Chris said, if you got another go-around with the Sonoma Stompers with the past decade's advances in technology, and assuming for sake of argument you wanted to, how would you approach the experiment differently? And then a listener named Philip, who just read the book a couple weeks ago, it's nice to hear that people are still discovering it in 2025, also wanted to know what would be the biggest difference in running this experiment in 2025 or 2026 versus 2015. So that is the question that multiple listeners want to know. If we were to do this again, how would it be different?
I don't have a good answer for that. I presume it would go exactly the same. I mean, I would still be me. And whatever, like it would be different if I was doing it with the lessons learned from the first time. Yeah. But if you put 35-year-old me and 144-pound Ben in the same situation, but just with 2025 tech and analytics. I don't think that necessarily we would do anything all that different. I think the big difference would be that I think that probably more players at that age are like aware of the resources that are out there, and they all want to take advantage of those resources. Like we had like one guy who had heard of Driveline at the time, and he was like, "Can you hook me up with Driveline?" And if we had, known that he was going to be that eager to do it with a little bit more time, we might have tried to do that. Like I could imagine that if we'd had that idea in April of that year, we would have set him up with Driveline and had him doing like video consulting or something, and that would have been part of the book. I think if you did it now, like 15 of the 23 guys on the roster would be actively seeking lab type things like that.
As much as we did. Yeah.
So probably there would be a lot more appetite for us to be just basically like brokers and connecting players to consultants or players to, trainers, that type of thing, like offbeat trainers. So that probably would have been some of that. Of course, like it was a big production to get a couple of PitchFX cameras out there. Nowadays, I guess like those are all like pretty portable. They're not PitchFX cameras, but like those sorts of things are pretty portable, and you could probably just get one and bring it to the field every day, right?
Yeah, you could probably we'd have some HitFX thing or Rapsodo or Edgertronic. It would be more complicated because there's just so much stuff. We thought we were pretty fancy for getting a PitchFX system, which we were. Even in retrospect, it's kind of hard to believe that actually happened. But now,
wearables. Wearables in the time were considered like sort of like dystopian, and
right. We got some bat trackers, and then we very half-heartedly tried to use them, and we barely did. But like, now we would really
heart rate stuff, and basically heart rate stuff. Everybody would be wearing a watch. I would say.
Yeah, and we were overwhelmed with the information that we had even then, and it would be hard to like get a StatCast set up at Arnold Field. But if we somehow managed to do that, we wouldn't even be able to analyze the information because we'd have to have a whole staff. We'd have to have like huge hard drives even to store that information. So it's advanced beyond probably our capacity to even make sense of that data if we manage to gather it. And there's so many things. Yeah, some are probably easier to obtain than they were then, or we might have a better sense of what we were doing with them. I also think that maybe we've just kind of moved past the need for a wild experiment, as the subtitle says, because all that stuff is happening in the actual games. And so I think part of the fun of it is have a couple of writers who don't normally get to do this, like amateurs taking over. But also part of the pitch, at least, was we'll go beyond what any actual team would do. And now we wouldn't even be able to because teams just did all that stuff. Some of the stuff we did, they did, and they did it so much and it worked so well that it then got outlawed and you can't do it anymore. So like, I don't know that we would be able to do that kind of pushing the boundaries because like what did teams not do now that we out here say, oh, they should do this, they should do that. Pretty much all the stuff that it makes sense to do, it seems like they do.
Yeah, I think so. And, having a, somewhat nerdy guy in the dugout is not unusual anymore. Having that interaction between the front office decision-making and the on-field decision-making is not at all unusual. So the fish out of water aspect of it would still work. But like who we represent, what archetype we're supposed to be representing wouldn't be like as novel, I don't think.
And how would my larger traps change the dynamic of me being in the dugout and completely not fitting in? Would I command more respect from the athletes? How would that change everything?
Yeah, you would fit in, and the clash would be between you and me. And
I'd be pushing you into a locker with the other bros.
You'd be telling me that the closer is the closer because he's the closer, bro.
Right. Yeah. I mean, now who even knows what a starting pitcher versus a relief pitcher is anymore? It's just all kind of blending together. So, yeah, I don't know that it would work so well. I don't feel a tremendous desire to try my hand at that again. It was a little tempting in the moment, But now I kind of feel like the moment has passed, at least. Not that the book actually turned out to be that we did all the cutting edge stuff that teams wouldn't try. In a couple cases, yes, but mostly it turned out to be us being so bad at stuff that we never actually did half the things that we intended to do. But the other thing is that it would have to be about development of the players much more so than it was then, because we tried a little bit of that, but we just had a hard time catching up and getting our heads above water. And we had a 3-month season and all the rest. But now the whole emphasis, because back then it was more of the Moneyball era. Let's see if we can find some untapped talent by sorting a spreadsheet. Whereas now it would have to be, can we make these guys better? And so we'd have to track all sorts. We'd have to figure out, did we make them throw harder or get their bat speed up over the course of the season or whatever? And what do we know about that? So yeah, it would be harder, I think, in some ways.
I don't know. I what do we know about that is, I don't know, maybe that's kind of true. But I think even if we had 3 more months in 2015, that would have been the direction that we would have been going in.
Yeah.
That is already the direction that we would have liked to have been going in at the end of the season. Just the season ended too fast.
Yeah, 3 months is just not very long, especially when it takes the first couple of weeks to just set up a camera and figure out how to retrieve the footage or whatever else we were trying to do. So yeah, maybe that was the right time. Maybe that was the last possible time we could do an experiment like that and have it seem actually bold and boundary pushing. And now it's just table stakes to do all that stuff. So well done, I guess. Good
Thanks.
job us with our timing. Though if someone else wants to give it a go, I'd be interested in seeing how they would do. Okay, a couple other things I wanted to ask you about. The first is Pebble Hunting, your excellent Substack, which I hope that everyone is reading. I'm sure not everyone listening is reading, but they should be. They would like it. They should go sign up. You gave me free Pebble Hunting, I believe, and you cost yourself some money because I would have happily paid. I have read every word since you started publishing, but this is the 3rd season that you've been doing Pebble Hunting, and you did something different this year. And you didn't announce that you were doing anything different, I don't think. And I don't know whether you conceived of it as something different or whether you were sure that you were going to do something different. But when the season started, you just turned it into a diary, essentially. And each entry, almost every entry, is day X of the MLB season, and you write about something that happened that day. And so it's December in real life, but in Pebble Hunting, it's about the All-Star break now, I think.
Just about, yeah. It's actually the last day before the All-Star break. Although I do think I'm going to speed it up quite a bit now, partly because as I noted this in one of the posts, but my note-taking actually, as the season got toward the end, my note-taking really slowed down. I had this sense that the end was coming and the potential of each moment felt less there. And so I actually have a lot less to write about in the second half than I did in the first half. So there's that. But also, I think that there's an aspect where if you open a newsletter in December and it starts with, a date in July, you're just not that interested in it. I do have a little bit of a framing problem here where I don't think that it makes it more fun to read. It was more of I think I chose to do this almost entirely for my own kind of benefit. I needed to find a way to write more and to not be overwhelmed by because what happens, so what normally will happen is I'll be watching baseball and I'll see something and I'll think, oh, that would be fun to write about. But either I'm already in the middle of writing about something, and so I don't have the mental space to do it. Or immediately my sort of performance anxiety is oh no, what if it's not good? And I get scared of it and then I don't want to engage with it. And so the idea was that I would just jot down everything that I see that seemed to be worth writing about. And I'd take the pressure off by letting future me write about it sometime in the future.
And was not announcing this plan part of taking the pressure off because you didn't want to commit to doing it all season, or because you never said here's what we're doing season 3. I'm going to keep track of stuff every day. And the funny thing is it's divorced from time sort of, because you don't even say what the date is. And I had to calculate that we're almost at the All-Star break. I'm not even sure when I read Pebble Hunting when it's happening. It's like it's happening at any time. It could be happening today, except they're not playing baseball now. The good thing about it is that I guess it gives you off-season content because they're not still playing MLB games, but you're still writing about MLB games because you're catching up. But it takes it out of time.
Well,
because
that's the goal. I think that's the goal, is that it will feel out of time, because I'm not writing about like, oh, well, are the Blue Jays falling apart? Can they right the ship before the, the trade deadline? Like, I'm sort of taking myself out of the topics that get dated and trying to write about things that are going to be interesting forever and ever. And that's actually a little bit of the framing when I take the notes, is like the way this started was I had a sheet of paper, and I would watch baseball throughout the day. And then the next morning I would basically be like, okay, what do I remember from yesterday? And, like, I've always been really interested in this idea of what we remember, like what survives, what doesn't just like immediately like get stuck in the present and never move into the future. And so I would write about what I remembered from the day before. And then the further behind I got, the more there would be like a filtering out of things that weren't worth remembering. And so like yesterday, I wrote about a manager trying to get a catcher's interference call because the catcher touched the batter with his foot. And I think that's like timeless, right? Like, that's just a weird sort of play that it is relevant to the era because catchers are playing super close to batters. And it maybe is relevant to the future if we start having to watch catcher feet. But mostly it's just this kind of like weird thing that I will remember from that day of watching baseball. And it doesn't, like you say, it doesn't really matter what day it happened. It doesn't necessarily really matter what year it happened. It's just like part of my, it goes into the giant barrel of memories that I have from the game. So yeah, timelessness, I think, was the goal. Not announcing it. You and I both know you can never announce a season-long project because you will hate it. But if you announce it, you will hate having to finish it. I had this with unique pitching lines. One year, I had rereading everything that Nate Silver had written at Baseball Prospectus. One year, I had It Hurts to Watch Albert Pujols Run. One year, you had, what have you had?
I did catcher framing of the week for a while there.
Yeah, and it gets boring and tired. And so I didn't want to announce that like I was definitely going to make it through an entire year this way. I didn't want to make it a project. It was more just something to get me writing quickly and often.
And the great thing about it, I think, is that if you read Pebble Hunting, you get a lot of things that you won't get anywhere else. I guess the downside, if it is a downside, is that you'll get almost nothing you will get somewhere else. So as you said, if there's like a big trade or something, you're not necessarily going to get the Sam Miller trade reaction at Pebble Hunting. If there's some big news, you might chime in. If there's a great World Series, for instance, you might write about whether that was the greatest World Series. Or if something happens and that sparks some association with something else, then you might sort of skip ahead to write about that thing. But usually you're writing about something that is a Pebble Hunting exclusive, essentially. It's unique to Pebble Hunting. You're usually not writing about something that people already know they're interested in. You're writing about things they didn't know they were interested in and hopefully will become interested in over the course of reading the newsletter because they weren't even aware of them at all. So they couldn't have known whether they would be interested in it or not. Yeah. So it's all sort of like idiosyncratic stuff, I guess. I mean, it's all fascinating to me, but it does, I guess, violate the normal rules of trying to attract business, which is like write about things everyone has heard of or is Googling that just happened like within the last couple hours while you're getting search traffic or whatever. It's not that, but I hope that it has found an audience and sort of an evergreen one because, there's no shelf life for most of this stuff.
Well, good. Has it? You tell me. I don't know if it works. I don't know if it has worked. I have really enjoyed doing it. I don't know what I don't know if I will do anything remotely similar to this next year or not. But like, I do sometimes worry that people are annoyed that I'm like, they might think that I'm just late, They might be like, man, this guy took 4 months to write about a blooper in a Rockies game. Like, he's got to quit procrastinating. Write faster.
Well, the thing about it, I think, and this is maybe sort of your superpower or one of them. You have many powers. You're a 5-tool writing talent. But in addition to just the great writing and good analysis and all the rest of it, is that it seems like you watch an extraordinary amount of baseball. And I say that as someone who watches a fair amount of baseball myself. But I'm always really impressed and intimidated, kind of, by how much you watch, because almost everything you write about is something you personally observed. In fact, you've had a series this season on what you call the NSAs, the Never See Agains, which is plays that should be highlight worthy, but will never be in a highlight reel because they didn't result in an out or whatever, but they were just as impressive as a play that delivered the ball a split second earlier so that there was an out call instead of a safe call. And those things you only know about because you're watching. And it seems to me that you must just watch more baseball than almost anyone else, and not just have it on in the background, but watch it in a focused, intentional, note-taking type of way. So I don't know if this is more watching than you used to do, or whether this exercise has caused you to watch more.
It has freed me up to watch more, because otherwise what happens is I start to get stressed by whatever I'm working on, and then I don't want to watch the baseball. The baseball feels like work. It feels like a distraction. I procrastinate by, not watching. And in this way, because I don't know, it's weird. Because the thing I'm writing about is not a threat to me, because I'm not going to get to it for 3 months, it's not threatening to watch baseball anymore. I can just watch it, take notes of things that are fun, and then be like, I'll sort that out in 3 months. I'll like that in 3 months. And if I don't like it in 3 months, I just skip it. I've usually got 7 or 8 things per day. And by 3 months later, the thing that I like the most has been sitting in my heart for that whole time, waiting to be written about. And other things have connected with it. There's been a great connecting aspect here where, because I know I'm going to be writing about, for instance, I'm going to be writing about umpires closing their eyes when the pitch comes in, which...
Oh, we entered a listener email about that not long ago.
I should have written about it when it happened.
It was about what would happen if an umpire sneezed.
Oh, yeah.
And they missed the play. So you could probably do whatever you're doing.
Okay,
but,
everybody, don't tell anybody I'm writing about this. I don't want someone to sneak in on it. But there was some foul tip or something where the umpire had closed his eyes at the moment of the foul tip, and I'm like, how is he couldn't see that, his eyes are closed. So then I spent the rest of the season knowing I was definitely going to write about umpires' eyes closing, and so I have all these other I was making these connections. Anyway, so that happened a lot. There's a lot of 7 examples of something where if I had tried to write it that day, I only would have had the one example. Which is a good thing. That's a great thing. And yeah, I think in some ways I've had some really interesting insights that wouldn't have occurred to me otherwise. I think that maybe my favorite thing that came out of this year was that I started noticing batters not running out the drop third strike, and by keeping paying very close attention to that, I was able to prove with data that hustle is down. I was pretty excited.
That's the other thing. You'll casually in one line be like, so I watched 357 examples of whatever it is. And then I'm just thinking, how long did that take?
Yeah, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes 1,000. I've watched 1,000 pitches for some of these before. 1,000. Just the entire day, just watching 6-second clip after 6-second clip.
That can be very zen. There's nothing better than that, really, when you have, because I can't listen to music or anything while I write, but I can if I'm just gathering data or doing something in a spreadsheet. So if I could just settle in for hours and just do some rote task, and listen to something while I do and zone out, that can be quite pleasant.
I spent 3 months watching to see how long it would take me to catch a baseball player tripping for no reason, Right. So that was fun.
Although I quibble with whether that was for no reason. I think it was not a completely unforced.
What are you talking about? He did not trip. He didn't trip on anything.
No, but he was performing a baseball activity. Like he was doing an athletic move, right? He wasn't just walking. He was, I don't remember the exact play, but whatever it was he was he trying to field something or something?
Oh man, he picked up a ball. It was a pitcher. He fielded a comebacker. He stood up and then he just began his move to first, but he wasn't running. He
was in the midst of making a play, but
no, come on. He did. This is nothing. This is a foot shuffle. This is a shuffle at most, which is no harder than a walk, than a step.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think this is pretty obviously he just fell over. He didn't trip on anything. Nothing hit him. He was standing and then he was falling.
Yeah, it's true. But he wasn't just walking back to the dugout after the end of an inning or something. I mean, there was time pressure, it's a low bar for a coordinated professional athlete not to fall down while performing a routine activity. So I'm with you on that. But yeah, I've seen and done less coordinated things than that.
Well, I got another trip that happened later in the year, so I'll probably get to that one.
Yeah. Look forward to reading about that in March or whenever you get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. And it lowers the bar, I guess, for what is worth writing about, because it's not like every piece has to have some thesis or something. I mean, hopefully it does, but it could just be, here's what I noticed this day, and this was kind of interesting. And it will be interesting to me, but it does remove some of that pressure to do I want to clog someone's inbox with this? Is this worthy of bringing to their attention? And, if you're doing this season-long exercise, it's just, here's the latest thing that I noticed. So I like that. But did you watch How To with John Wilson?
Yes.
Pebble hunting has basically become baseball how-to with John Wilson.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Which is a high compliment in my mind, because that's an incredible show. But I think it's true in part because
I actually prefer to think of it as the baseball version of The Gleaners and I, the Agnes Varda documentary, but fine, whatever, if you want to go middle brow.
How To with John Wilson, one of the impressive, amazing things about it is that he has so much footage, because he's just observing and his team of documentarians is just filming everything all around them. And so he will say something and then show an image that goes with that. And you wonder, and of course he's crafting the narration to go with footage that he has, but it seems like he has a clip for every possible thing that he might say. And that's what happens in pebble hunting too, because you will always have just here's a GIF I saved of some, I don't know, random celebration after a play in May or whatever it is. And you'll just break out that GIF. And it makes me wonder about the Indiana Jones-esque storehouse of clips and highlights you must have. How is this even organized? Do you have a massive folder with daily GIFs and notes about how do you even retrieve an example like that? Do you have a spreadsheet of every GIF that you've captured?
No, so I have my notes, my notes document, my notes file, whatever. And so that's about 17,000 words, and it's just organized by day, right? So it just it just goes reverse chronological. And then I just put 4 or 5 words, whatever the thing is. And if there is a GIF or if there is a screen grab attached to that, connected to it, then I will write down what the name of the file is. And then I put all of it in a file, in a folder that says 2025 season. And so then when it gets to that one, I just go look for the GIF that says Gorman Fundies, which I've written in my Word document. And that's all it is.
Do you ever take notes on something and then forget why that was meaningful to you? Do you take comprehensive enough notes that you can explain to your later self why you recorded that? Or is it you wake up from a dream and scribble something and then you in the morning have no idea what you were talking about?
No, usually these are basically no. Basically the answer is I always know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I will put a link to the play in question, and then it'll just be this. And I'll be well, I don't know what that is. So I have to watch the play in question because I don't know what this is. But Like, for instance, September 15th, after Gallon fundies, they immediately got a new ball. You know what that is, right?
Sure.
That is that for some reason, the catcher's throw back to the pitcher was just really stupid. And Zach Gallen was like clearly annoyed that this throw was not at him. And so he put forth like a 2% effort to try to catch it. But the ball just like went past him. Okay. And then because it had touched the ground, they put a new ball in play. And the reason that I saved that is because I've been looking for the least a ball has to touch the ground for it to not be, for it to be replaced. And that is, I don't know if I'm going to write about that. I don't know if I have enough examples to make an essay out of it, but that is why I thought about that. They immediately got a new ball, okay? Then September 14th, after Alonso's walk-off homer, Lindor two-slowed him. You know what? Obviously, you know what that is, right?
Is this that when I know you've tracked the ones where the player like takes a beat to throw and then takes too long to throw?
No, this was everybody was giving Pete Alonso high fives, and then Francisco Lindor gave him a fake high five and then went too slow. And that was a weird time to see a guy too slow his teammate. Right. Yeah. So I have a GIF that is Alonso too slow. And if I write about that, I don't know if I will. I don't think I will. But if I write about that, that's what that'll be.
Okay.
Joe Ryan's you as he walked off the mound of a scoreless inning. I mean, I love it when players are really fired up after they get 3 outs in a row and they're like screaming and like, you guys probably don't have an editor that's going to edit out my profanity like at the round table.
We do bleeps now.
Okay, good. All right, good. So yeah, the Cubs frantic ball guy. They have a ball guy who's pretty frantic. Cubs fans know what I'm talking about. Josh Smith bunt spin. I got a lot of slow motion replays of bunts because I liked watching the ball roll over. I'm not going to use that, but there's a GIF for it. Anyway, so you have a sense of what the note taking is like. How far do the Rangers spit their seeds? Gabby Moreno almost landed the ball in his divot. That's a good one. I'll probably write about that.
And if you don't write about some of these things, you could do one of your Prune the Past roundup posts where you have things that are almost worthy of a full edition and you just get them all out of your head at once.
A lot of these won't get rid, and I think I am actually going to do a Prune the Past week next week because I got to get rid of some of these. But like a lot of these are not, they sound like not worth a post when I just put it like that. But one, I won't get to a lot of them. Two, they do connect and make, themes. And John Wilson's a good comp. And yeah, I mean, all of these end up being 1,900 words and have a big lesson, big life lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. And probably it would make a good time capsule if you do this approach for multiple seasons. I don't know if you will, but just to open up a document from several years ago and go day by day and reminisce about the things that you saw. That would be kind of interesting. And probably people would be interested in the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor that you didn't actually write about. And you have certain obsessions that you develop that you return to. And sometimes you can even see evolutions in them over the course of a season. Like you've written a lot about catcher interference, as you said, and the highlights that are not highlights, and the first pitch of the game getting grooved. That was a big one for you this year. And that paid off because you noticed that the first pitch of the game is pretty much always just a fastball down the middle, more or less. And you argued that people should be swinging at those more. And then it seemed like teams took your advice to some extent after that. So then you got multiple editions out of that. So that's always nice.
Thanks for letting me talk about it. I got to say, I feel like I haven't said this, but I feel like this is the one place that people will forgive me if I say it. I think it's really good. I think I'm doing good work, and I hope people will appreciate it. It's a big lonely internet out there these days. I've talked about this elsewhere. You probably have noticed this. You don't write about baseball, but you've probably noticed this about other things. It is no longer a sharing internet. You used to publish your thing, and then you get to spend a whole day watching people retweet it. And things just don't get shared the same way. Everything is sort of siloed off. Social media sites don't really like to promote sharing of outside sites. I'm doing a paywalled newsletter so that no one wants to share anything from a paywalled newsletter for good reason, because people who aren't paying for it are like, why are you sending me this? So it is a little bit of like, it's hard to not get the same type of, like sugar feedback that I used to get. But I do think that, like, man, I've written a lot of stuff this year that I'm like, that's great.
I think so too. So I was going to call it indispensable, but then I rethought that because almost everything and everyone is dispensable when you get right down to it. But I think it is irreplaceable in the sense that it's not a commodity. The things that you're writing about would not be written about anyone else usually if you weren't writing about them. And probably for some people, it's not for them. Much like this podcast, I suppose. But if this podcast is for you, then probably pebble hunting would be for you. So go check it out if you haven't already at pebblehunting.substack.com. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about is something that I assume will be coming to Pebble Hunting sometime soon, but you've been doing for years and years. You referenced it earlier. Your What Will Be Remembered, What We'll Remember from this year. You've been doing that since ESPN, and you haven't done it yet this year. I assume you will, and so you probably don't have an answer yet, or if you do, you don't want to spoil it. But I've been thinking about what we'll remember from this year, so I was going to toss out a few possibilities.
Honestly, I don't even mind spoiling it. I wrote at such length about the Shohei Ohtani game in the LCS, and then the World Series, the full World Series, and then game 7 of the World Series. And I think, I don't think there's much suspense. Those so overwhelming. It was a pretty bland year, Like
that's what I was going to add. Right. It's can anything overcome either game? Well, I guess, is it the playoffs as a whole? You could argue, because the playoffs were just really good, just statistically and also kind of vibes-based. Everyone agreed the playoffs were great. The World Series specific World Series games.
Yeah, 2 of them.
Or the Ohtani game.
Yeah.
And you almost have to specify which Ohtani game, but the clincher in the NLCS.
I don't think you do have to. You and I might have to, maybe we might have to specify, but I think that I do think that for some decades, the Ohtani game will not require specification. That it will just.
Well, I was thinking of World Series Game 3, which was an Ohtani game, but it was also
10 times, and it was the game.
It was noteworthy for other reasons too, whereas Game 4 of the NLCS was just the Ohtani game.
Yeah.
And you've written at length about Ohtani in the context of what we'll remember. You did last year. Yeah. You did a 4-part series or something.
3.
And a lot of it was about Ohtani and what we'll remember about him and how he maybe broke the whole idea. And so I guess that's another question. Did Ohtani's latest memorable feats erase some of his previous feats? Like if Ohtani was what we'd remember about a previous year, did that get overwritten now by the more recent, the fresher, even greater exploits in the postseason? And so now we'll have a new thing that we remember Ohtani for, and something else will slide in and overtake him in a past season. I don't know.
Well, we had that conversation after the first Ohtani year where we said, but wait, what if he's better next year? And so there was always a little bit of a hesitation to like announce the Ohtani year too soon, but I think that's past. Like Ohtani just gets all these different years now, because what he does is he's not just like, oh, Stan Musial, he had a great year. Oh, he hit 347. He was the best player in the National League. Like that's not why that's not why it's his year. It's that every year is in fact unlocking new things and doing things that he himself has never done, that nobody has ever done, that nobody else will ever do again, quite possibly, but that also are new to him. And so I don't really have a problem awarding him year after year. It's like unprecedented, other than kind of Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth sort of had a run of these years, but I don't have a problem with it. And if I end up settling on the Ohtani game as the answer this year, it won't bother me. And I don't think I don't think he has been retconned out of any of his previously awarded years. I think that he does. I think that his memorable years are still his memorable years.
How often has it been the case that the thing that you thought got remembered from each year is just a game that one player had, or even a postseason series for that matter? Is it often that? I guess some years it's a spectacular World Series or something, or some moment in a World Series, but is that kind of uncommon for it to just be like that guy had a great game?
I'd have to look at like the whole 130-year list of it, but I don't think so. I mean, a lot of times it's a single play, right? Willie Mays made that catch. That's like clearly the answer for that year. And, you know, Harvey Haddix. Everybody remembers Harvey Haddix. Nobody knows anything about 1959 or whatever, except this one Harvey Haddix game. Yeah, like, you know, Carl Hubble struck out 5 consecutive Hall of Famers in the All-Star game is a thing. And there's a bunch of things like that.
I was trying to think of what could possibly rival either the Ohtani game or the World Series or whatever it is. And I don't know that there's a better choice.
Well, so there's one really good choice, but it just doesn't seem to be. It is also a very late-breaking possibility, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be historic enough. Like, no one cares. I don't know. Like, it hasn't been as big a news as I expected it would be. But I mean, it's like Emmanuel Clase.
Yes,
you know,
that's what I was going to say is one, and that it totally depends really on what comes next. I guess either way, maybe if this turns out to be a singular incident and they crack down on that type of bet and no one ever does it again or no one ever gets caught doing it, maybe that would burnish its legacy because it'd be remembered as the one time someone did that or got caught doing it. Or if that becomes kind of a common occurrence, then maybe that's the moment when the Pandora's box opened or the floodgates opened and everyone remembers that as the first time that happened, or no one remembers it because it becomes commonplace. But that's possible. I was thinking Cal Raleigh has a case, right? Just his
Cal
season.
Raleigh, yeah. I mean, in a weak year, we would have been talking about him for this category until the end. You know, basically until October started, it seemed like it was quite possibly going to be either Cal Raleigh or, as like weird, it's like going to be hard to believe that we thought this was a big deal, but the torpedo bat game at the beginning of the year when the Yankees homered on the first 3 pitches. We learned about the torpedo bat at the same time. Like, that was a pretty big moment in ball, right? And it has like good lore potential, but we're all sort of bored of torpedo bats. But yeah, Cal Raleigh. I think Cal Raleigh is an example of like, he defined the season for us. He is our defining storyline of the season, but he doesn't have like the memorability that is going to entrance kids reading books 60 years from now. And so I don't think that he's likely. Now, it really does help that he's got a couple of records. Records get you repeated.
You'll hear his name in this season repeated for many years.
You will. Although, in a weird way, like the fact that no catcher is ever going to get within 10 homers of him kind of hurts because no one's going to ever be chasing him. But yeah, Cal Raleigh that's fine. He's a fine answer, but like it would be a pretty weak one.
Yeah. Dodgers repeating is just related to Shohei in the World Series, but it had been a long time since anyone did that. And the whole deepening the discussion about the Dodgers breaking baseball and cementing their status as a dynasty. Maybe that's all just kind of wrapped up together. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the Rockies. Now, if the Rockies had broken the White Sox loss record, maybe that wouldn't be remembered because that was a 1-year-old record. If they had broken all of the records for being bad, like most losses, worst winning percentage, etc., they did, though, get worst run differential modern era by like a lot. But that just probably does it because you have to caveat you can't count the spiders in 1899, and also most people don't care as much about run differential. So, but they were worse in many respects than the White Sox were the prior year, but probably won't be as well remembered.
If they had lost like 130, they would have been a good contender. But even if they'd lost like 123 and broke the records by a little, coming so soon after the White Sox had the 121 loss season, there wasn't like a pent up energy tracking their chase or anything like that. So I don't know. They had a shot. They were like a first half story. I watched a lot of Rockies in the first half. I didn't watch any Rockies in the second half. I don't think they were chasing anything. I don't think they're that memorable. Yeah. And, run differential, I don't need to go into this, but the higher the run scoring environment, the more it encourages. Like if you lose 6-3 and you lose 3-0, those are the same for run differential, but they're not the same for Pythagorean record, you know? And so when you say they had the worst run differential, that's partly just raw numbers caused by their offensive environment. I don't know if their Pythag record was actually the worst of all time. But anyway, it's too complicated. It's not fun.
Yeah. And the only others that occurred to me, well, there were a couple memorable collapses, memorable to their teams. There was the Mets collapse, but it's not even the most memorable Mets collapse of this century, probably. And then what could have been is the Guardians' comeback and the Tigers' collapse, except that gets kind of ruined as a timeless story, both because the Tigers still made the playoffs and because they then beat the Guardians and almost undid the collapse in a sense. So that seemed like it was going to be an enormous story for about a week, and then it becomes kind of forgettable. Just like you blow an unprecedented lead to blow, and then the implications of that basically don't go beyond like that week or two. So yeah, that probably won't. Nick Kurtz, like if Nick Kurtz turns out to be the best hitter ever, and this was the year he arrived on the scene and had an all-time rookie great offensive season, I guess maybe. It occurred to me the Yankees' facial hair policy ending. Like, I don't know. You never know what will somehow be memorable if every Yankee suddenly has a beard next year, maybe. Also, one kind of out of left field one, the All-Star swing-off. Like if that turns out to be precedent setting in some way, if eventually we end up in a world where games are ended with swing-offs, and that's the first time it was really tried and seemed to be a success and everyone liked it. Maybe that has some potential, could have some legs.
That's that's a good one. That's a good out of left field suggestion.
That's about all I got, I think. But
I haven't really been thinking that hard about my own out of left field thoughts. So maybe I'll come up with some others in the next few weeks, or maybe I'll just end up writing about Ohtani and why, I'm not tired of him.
Okay, well, if anyone has ideas for something that can beat the Ohtani game, write in. Let us know. I'll share it with Sam, and we will look forward to the breakdown on pebble hunting. We'll look forward to pruning the past coming up. I assume your Hall of Fame ballot will be coming sometime in the next month or so. I don't know if you've made your decision yet, but I am curious, given that you became a big Hall guy last year, officially, finally, and you sort of decided that everyone's going to get in eventually, so I might as well help and not hinder. But I'm wondering if you can find 10 on this year's ballot, because sort of slim pickings.
I think I can find 10, yeah.
I think you can too, judging by who you voted for last year. It seems like Cole Hamels would be a cinch for you, probably. We'll find out.
We will.
How are you spending your days and nights now then, other than hitting the gym? I guess now that you are not watching the enormous amounts of baseball you must have been consuming over the past several, because I don't know, do you have an estimate for like how many hours a day you were every now and then there will be a pebble hunting where you'll be like days 87 to 97, I was traveling, didn't watch any baseball. So I don't know what happened those days, but on average, I mean, that must have been a huge part of your day and night that is now removed, as it is for me and many baseball fans, but especially for you, the quantity you were consuming.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 probably hours a day. MLB app, MLB TV, whatever, they do a version of Spotify Wrapped now.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't think it's come out yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing my numbers this year.
Yeah, you better be top 0.1% or something.
Because I really did enjoy watching baseball way more this year than in previous years. And I thought that this format was great. I like watching baseball, but I like liking it. I don't like watching it when I don't like it. Like, oh, I got to watch. That's no fun. So this was like great. Like I felt, I think that there are a few, I've picked up a few like sort of like super traits that, let's see if I can put this in the right way, but like personality traits or maybe like states of mind that encourage and help grow all the other positive states of mind, basically. So like if you are grateful, if you are humble, and if you are curious, it basically like unlocks all the positive ways you would ever like to feel. Like those are like the 3 foundational states of positive being: humility, gratitude, and curiosity, right? Mm-hmm. And I really felt curious about baseball throughout this year. And a lot of times it's like May 1st. By May 1st, you're like, they're still doing this? They're still going? Can we just like skip to the hot stove? And I didn't feel that way this year. So in that way, it was good to feel the curiosity.
Well, you said every edition of the newsletter almost wraps up with some sort of life lesson, and now this podcast appearance has as well. We got some classic Sam Miller philosophizing there at the end. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Ben.
Everyone should go subscribe to Pebble Hunting at pebblehunting.substack.com if they haven't already. And I will be back in just a second with John Yandel, who has been throwing batting practice before games started by opposing left-handed pitchers since 1985. We'll discuss arm care in your 70s, whether human batting practice pitchers can fend off pitching machines, and John's experience as the personal batting practice pitcher for Barry Bonds. I think you might enjoy this interview, Sam.
Oh, I'll go listen to it. Is it up?
Not yet. When this is, it will be.
Ben isn't here and we're lacking production. So this is me singing you the introduction. Effectively wild. Ben isn't here and we're lacking production. So this is me singing you the introduction. Effectively wild.
Well, by day, he is the executive managing director of the San Jose office of real estate firm Newmark. By night, or actually by other parts of some days, he's the Giants' left-handed batting practice pitcher, as he has been for 41 seasons and counting. And today, he is my guest on Effectively Wild. Welcome, John Yandel.
Thank you.
I was looking at your listing on the Newmark website, and it has, as is standard, an achievement section, an education section. It mentions that you went to Stanford. It mentions that you were the president of the Association of Silicon Valley Brokers several times. It mentions an award that you won from that association. And then it says batting practice pitcher for the San Francisco Giants baseball team, 1985 to present, which is not something that you would normally see on a corporate bio like this one. And I assume that must be a fantastic conversation starter. And I would know because it has started our conversation.
Yeah, baseball in general has been that for me even before I, started the position with the Giants. It's just something a little different. And yeah, it's that icebreaker. It's the beginning part of most conversations now. That is how I get introduced. It's something that everybody wants to talk about because at least around here, they're all Giants fans.
Right. Well, I definitely did want to talk about it, but I want to go back even before you got that side gig and talk about your professional pitching career before your professional batting practice pitching career. Give me a self-scouting report on yourself as a pitcher, as the pitcher who got drafted in the 11th round by the Padres and pitched several seasons in the minors.
Yeah, I played since I was 8 years old, and I've always been, God bless me with a good arm. And, I was big for my age back then. So I kind of threw harder than the other kids. And, that's my parents wouldn't let me throw any breaking pitches, my dad, until I was, out of Little League, which was great. So I think that helped keep my arm in shape as well, or not from getting hurt. And so then, played through high school and did fairly well, was drafted out of high school in the 14th round because by the time they had the draft, I was already given a scholarship to Stanford. And so they kind of thought I'd be going, and which I did. And so I dropped down in the draft to the 14th round then. And then, went to Stanford and had a great time. And my only really sore arm came my senior year. And so I ended up missing the last month of the season. And I remember back then they said, well, if it's not better in a couple of weeks, we'll cut on it, which back then, literally, there's no arthroscopic. They cut your arm and it was the ulnar nerve funny bone nerve in the elbow. So it wasn't just sore; it was painful. And then I went up to Alaska to play in a summer league that I'd been to the year before, and I didn't say anything because I really wanted to go up there and spend another season. I thought if they knew I had a sore arm, just kind of hoping to get better. And then I was warming up to go in. It hurt in the bullpen, and then I went out and the adrenaline took over, and I think that popped back into the little canal that the ulnar nerve goes in, and this never hurt. Huh. Yes. So
wow. So just pitch through it. just
pitch through it. Yeah.
Doesn't work for everyone.
Answer to your question, but
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and it's held up all this time, clearly. So what were you like as a pitcher? What did you throw? What was your stuff like?
Yeah, not Nolan Ryan kind of speed. Very few people do, but I would have good control and a good breaking pitch and kind of kept everything low, and I could hit inside targets and outside targets, and so and a good slider. So just mixing it up back then, and keeping the ball from the middle of the plate. And now it's a joke. I trying to get people out. Now I get paid to get hit because I throw it down the middle of the plate now, and the harder they hit, the better I'm doing.
And you weren't hit all that hard in the minors. You made it to AAA with the Padres in your fourth season with them, mostly as a reliever. And then you went to the Angels for one more season in AA, and then you called it a career. Your numbers on the surface weren't too shabby. You were in your age 26 season, which clearly for a lefty, that's young. So I assume that you decided that it was time to walk away?
Yeah, kind of a combination, kind of a mutual decision, to be honest. It was, I had a good season. I was, I think, 3-2 in Hawaii, even AAA, with like probably a mid-3 ERA. And I thought there was a chance that, I would be able to make it up the next year. Just kind of spot deal. Being left-handed certainly helped. And so those were my hopes, aspirations, whatever else. And then I got to spring training, and there was a new general manager, Trader Jack McKeon. He got known as Trader Jack. So there was no loyalty to who was there already, and he wanted to kind of form his own team and and do whatever. So they were 2 days before spring training was over, had my ticket in hand to go back to Hawaii again. They traded for 4 pitchers, 3 of who were left-handed, 2 who had major league experience. Dave Dravecky was one of them. Seaman was another one. And so they wanted to kind of kick me down to AA again. And I'd been there, done that. And so kind of asked for the release, and then went over, because it was so late in spring training, I signed on AA for California Angels, and ended up going to Holyoke, Massachusetts. And that was brutal weather during April and May. So I didn't pitch. They already had kind of the rotation set up, and didn't pitch that much in the beginning. And then I didn't have a good first half, had a really good second half for kind of a mediocre overall season. And so Warren Spahn was actually the traveling pitching coach, and he was in town. And so I went out with drinks with him and just said, hey, I would like to go to big league camp as a non-roster player, or, I'm going to probably call it quits. And he goes, well, you better call it quits then. So I did, and all my friends were, making money from Stanford, and they were having good jobs. And I was making, $1,000 a month or whatever it was back then. I think it was actually $3,000 a month, but for 6 months out of the year. And so, I kind of thought it was my time. And so then, I got out of it. And I still remember the first nights, the most academic thing I'd done in the 4.5 years I was playing was read the Sunday comics. And, so I went, and my girlfriend at the time had her Stanford MBA. And so I thought, okay, I got to get an MBA. That's the way it goes. And so I took the test without any qualification, without any practice test, without studying, whatever, just wanted to do it. And it was brutal. I didn't do very well on it. So I'm still without my MBA now. But the rest kind of is, just always continued to play. I moved up to Portland, played in the league there during the summer, and then moved down to California in '85. And one of the guys that I played with in Holyoke, Massachusetts, was up with the Giants. And so I was visiting him in the locker room, and coaches knew that I threw, and they all, towards the end of the '85 season, and they had sore arms and needed somebody to throw batting practice. So that started it. I've just kind of kept showing up every year afterwards.
Yeah, and you've pitched a lot longer than Warren Spahn, speaking of lefties who stayed in the game a long time. So you go from Haleakala to Holyoke to business. Did you, in that interim, when you weren't pitching before you caught on with the Giants, did you have any regrets about having walked away, or did you just not look back?
No, pretty much every day. Yeah. And it was such a different life. And you realize once you're out, you can't really go back in. I mean, there are stories of people that do, but, it's few and far between. And yeah, I ended up having to, I worked for Burroughs Computer Company, selling their check processing equipment. And, there's back into presentations, which I hadn't had a lot of experience doing, and learning about the product. So before presentations, I'd spend all night, studying, getting ready for it and all that. And yeah, there was many times at 3 or 4 in the morning going, what am I doing? You're just be coming in from the bars right now, and I'm up studying. But, life has been great. God's been great to me, and it's all part of the path. And I think that it's just the way that it was meant to be, and to hook on with the Giants and still be around it. Face it, if I ever did make it to the big leagues, it would have been for a short career, and that would have probably been it.
Right. Yeah. Your friend who you mentioned, who you were visiting when you serendipitously were asked to throw BP, was Ricky Adams, right, who had played with you in Double-A. And '85 was his last year in the big leagues. He played 54 games for the Giants, 120 games total. And that was that for him in the big leagues, at least. So, yes, a lot of guys, even if they make it, they don't get to stay nearly as long.
Yeah, no, good research on your part. Yeah, that's exactly right. And he, and he was out. And then, I think when you make the big leagues, you think you're big, and you don't go back and play summer league ball. Very few people do. Mm-hmm. When you're a minor league guy, you have the dreams of, I remember when I was first pitching with the Giants, I could still throw well there because I'd thrown for the 3 years, and I'd just been out of it for 3 years. And, you had visions of, hey, maybe, I could throw a session on the side and they would see me. I'm in the big leagues now. All I need to do is be seen or something. And, then that kind of faded away over the years too. But I did get to pitch in one game with the Giants with a big league team behind me when they went and played the AAA team, like they did every year in a game in Fresno, was where their AAA affiliate was. And so Mark Garner, who actually was in Fresno or grew up in Fresno, started the game, and he was going to go like 3 or 4 innings before the season started. This was kind of like their last game, and he was going to be the 3rd or 4th pitcher. So, and he didn't make it out of the first inning. He got crushed. And so they ran through some people. They had the game starting in a couple of days. They didn't really want to go through everybody. So I kept going to Dusty Baker, the manager at the time, and go, I'm ready. I can do it. Go out there. So finally, like the 8th inning, he comes up and says, you still want to throw? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, go get warmed up. So I went there and I threw and made it out of the inning. I walked the first guy, and he goes, I'm pretty nervous, and if you're just going to go like walk everybody. But then I got one guy to pop up. I struck out the next guy, and the third guy or fourth guy, I guess, because I walked somebody, flew out to left field. I made it out of the inning. So, but yeah.
Yeah. And in '78, when you got sent to Double-A, Roger Craig was the manager of the Padres in his first season, and he had to give you the news that you weren't going to make the club and said, I'll see you in the big leagues someday. And then he becomes the Giants manager in that '85 season when you're around, and you got to say, well, here I am, right? But I wonder, you could have had the glass half empty or glass half full view of making it to the majors in the way that you did, because I could imagine that the proximity to a major league mound, if you still had regrets about your pitching career, you might think even more acutely, oh, I could have made it. This is what I missed out on. Or you could have the optimistic take, which is, hey, I made it after all. Not quite exactly the way that I intended to or expected to, but this isn't so bad either. So it sounds like the latter is closer to the way that you perceive this.
Yeah, and then I wish I could say that attitude came quickly. But you go through your regrets, you go through what if things could have been different, and now after 40 years of doing it, you look back and go, well, things most likely wouldn't have been different. But, you look at, and I was never going to be like the superstar starting pitcher, but when you get down to the 11th, 12th guy in a pitching staff, in relief, there's not a lot of difference between a good AAA pitcher, and one of the big league guys that's in that position. So you always wonder how you would have done if you ever had the chance, but you also got to live with the fact that you'll never know.
And when you got that gig, you were young, you were 30, I guess, right? So was there a part of you that was treating it as a tryout? Just, hey, maybe I'll get another look here.
Yeah, no, that's mentioned before. Yeah, that lasted really a couple of years to where, because you throw from 50 feet, and so, you appear to be throwing harder, which, they want. But on the field, there's really two parts of batting practice. There's on the field, that's more 3/4 speed over the middle, all fastballs. And that's just kind of getting them warmed up and eye, hand, ball, contact coordination. And then there's in the cage, which is 45 minutes before the game starts. And that's where they want you to throw hard and, throw different pitches and, all that. So I've, over the years, back then even had developed a pretty good 50-foot curveball and slider and everything else. But, then I could throw hard, and they wanted me to throw as hard as I could. So it was competitive, but, Roger never went into the cage. He, was out on the field for batting practice, and when you're getting hit and doing whatever. So yeah, it's something I would have loved to have done, but didn't do. And then you realize that, just like what you said, you can be bitter about it or wish things were different or just be appreciative of what you have. And so it wasn't too long before. I mean, even in the beginning, I was always appreciative of going up there, and I never took anything for granted, year after year, and still kind of don't. I mean, they can tell me that I'm done, and then I would sue them for age discrimination and get my job back again. But yeah, it's and now the last couple of years I've gone down to spring training for the whole kind of 2.5 months, because and beginning of January, there's guys that live down there. It's a popular place for players to be that come by and want to take some swings and things like that. So I love that area. I'm not that busy at work. Everything, since COVID is a lot remote anyway. Mm-hmm. So it works out well to do that.
And at first you were making $20 a game. I assume you're making more now, but it seems like you're doing this not for financial reasons, but for the love of the game. And that tenure, that longevity that you've had, are you then the longest tenured member of the Giants organization? Is there anyone in any capacity you're aware of who has been with the team longer than you?
No, there is Karen Sweeney, who is the executive assistant to the general manager, who's been there, I think, 2 or 3 years less than I have. Mm-hmm. But on field, no, and Ron Wotus has been there for 27 years, I think, who's kind of was a third base coach, the bench coach. He's been kind of all the things, and he's still, active with them, doesn't travel and things like that, but still there. But I out tenure him as well. So I let him know all the time that he's got to respect me for it.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible that you've stuck around that long, because even though you're clearly good at the job, it would have been easy for you to have been replaced at some point. I mean, everything has changed over the years. All the players have come and gone, the managers, the coaches, ownership, even the GMs, et cetera. And so at any point, someone could have said, hey, thanks for your service, but I've got a buddy I'm bringing in to do this, or I'm doing it myself, or whatever it is. So have there been any close calls? I know about a decade ago, you had a rotator cuff injury and you were out for a while, right? And so a younger guy came in for a while, but as soon as you were able, they wanted you back. So
yeah, that didn't work out that well with him. I mean, he got released from AAA, and then they asked if he wanted to come during spring training, and I still wasn't healed up yet, and so they asked if he wanted to come and throw batting practice, which he did. He was left-handed as well, and so he never really got used to the, slowing things down and throwing it over the middle. And, about the fifth or sixth person that he hit, he kind of called me up and said, how you doing? You ready to go? Can you come back yet? And it was 6 months to the day after the surgery that I was back on the mound, which was honestly a little bit early. It hurt for the first, 2 or 3 weeks that I threw, and then it got good again, and never had a problem since, knock on wood. So, yeah, but then I was fired the first year by Murph, who is the clubhouse guy, Mike Murphy, who'd been there for, 50 years or something back in the Willie Mays days. So he didn't like Rick Adams because Rick didn't tip all that well, and he was messy and, whatever else. And so he related me to Ricky Adams. And so, I showed up the next year, and, he was the first guy I saw when I walked into the locker room, and he just goes, no, we don't need you this year. And so I said, okay, let me go say goodbye to a few people. So I went into Roger Craig's office, and said, hey, I really appreciate it. I had a great time last year and appreciate the opportunity. And he goes, what are you talking about? I go, well, Murph said you didn't need me this year. And he goes, go get your uniform on, put your uniform on, I'll go talk to Murph. So then I did. Same thing exactly happened the next year. And then I went into Roger's office, and he remembered, and then he goes, you're fired again? I go, yeah. I go, okay, I'll go talk to him. And then from then on, Murph was always, a little bit standoffish with me, which he can be, but he can also be the greatest guy in the world. And then after a few years, we became good friends. So, and I always reminded him when he denied it, but you remember when you've been fired.
Yeah. So aside from not plunking people, what is the key, or what are the keys to being a good batting practice pitcher?
So just control, getting the ball over and being consistent with the, like in the beginning, it's like on the field, it is, the goal is kind of 19 out of 20 pitches that are strikes, and every once in a while you let one go and slow or whatever, but they just want to get into that rhythm and swing and work on whatever they're working on. So it's control, number one. And, throwing a ball, that's relatively straight. And so, that's, unfortunately, I didn't do that so much in the beginning. That's why I got my nickname, which is Cutter John, because I was throwing at Candlestick Park, which had these horrendous winds coming at you and just swirled around the park. So any little unique spin would be magnified because of that wind. And so my ball tended to cut into a right-handed hitter. And, I was throwing like I did 3/4, release, regular pitching. And then I realized that if I threw it more like a football over the top, then that cut would go away. And so, that was all over probably a month or two period of time that I changed my motion in order to do it. But I'm still known as Cutter John 40 years later. So nicknames die hard. And so I mean, once I'm known as Sinker John because of gravity, then that's when I'll quit.
Right. And you estimate you've thrown something on the order of 1 million batting practice pitches. Have you tried to calculate this?
Yeah, I did. And somebody asked how many I threw, and I have no idea. You don't count up to 1 million, but, I just figured, every time that I've thrown, you throw probably 300 pitches, 120 or 150 on the field, and then equals to that, if not more, in the batting cage. And so, because when I first started, it didn't make any difference whether there was a right-hander or left-hander. They just need somebody. So I was up there every day, at the home games. I didn't travel back then. And then when Barry Bonds came in, he kind of liked the way I threw, became friends with him. And that's when he said, I want John to travel, and asked me first if I could. And, just like we were talking about earlier, my job was very good at letting me take time off and go do it. And so then I started traveling as well, and still am.
So what is your schedule then now, or how has it evolved over time? Now you're throwing BP before the Giants face a left-handed starter, is that right? So when do you get the call, and then what's your schedule on a game day?
Well, so yeah, I try to make as many games as possible. I'll miss 2 or 3 left-handers typically in a year, with other things that come up, or cities that are hard where there's just one left-handed. Milwaukee, for example, is really hard to get to. Pittsburgh's not that easy, no direct flights. And so, they know that I'll be there unless I tell them that I'm not going to be there. So it's more like, they don't ask me every time. They just kind of assume now. And so that's worked out well. And they've been great at, if I've taken the team plane, if it works out, if that first game is, the left-hander, then I'll take the team plane, and then I'll throw, and then I'll come back on a commercial flight. Most of the times I go back and forth on a commercial flight. And, there's times where I thought it was pretty important at the office, where I would fly out to New York, take the 6 o'clock flight in the morning, land at 2:30, had taken a taxi to the ballpark, throw, come back to the airport, and take a late night flight back so I could be in the office at 8 o'clock the next morning. And I don't do that anymore. I'll still have that schedule, but then I'll leave the next day, stay overnight, and then, realize that I've been to a lot of great cities, but never really saw any of the cities other than the ballpark. So now I'm kind of doing, last year's or whatever this is going to be. Who knows? I just want to have the experience of seeing all the places that I go to.
And your Newmark bio page says you've been doing this kind of work for 34 years, which is a long time, but not as long as you have been throwing batting practice. So were there times where they came into conflict, especially when you were earlier in your day job and not a senior and things weren't yet remote, where you had to make a choice, or there really was kind of I can't make it to that meeting because I've got BP?
Well, yeah, and a good question. And it's there were conflicts, but it was mainly me. It wasn't really the company and the clients or anything else. So I've really been able, because people know what I've done. And so, it's unique enough to where if I have to postpone a tour, then they understand, or I have a partner that I work with, that does the tour. I'm not there. They understand that. So the conflict was mainly self-imposed rather than, the company saying you can't go, or, client saying you can't go, or whatever. But, I never really, now it's totally different because I just, I'm older, been doing it for a long time. And so now that, my friends, are having grandkids and things like that, where they love baseball, I'll take them and get them on the field before the game and kind of give them a tour around. And, that's what I've been doing the last couple of years. The first 30 years, I didn't really want to have anybody think, which is stupid now I look back on it, but didn't want anybody to think that I was throwing because, it helped my job.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to let them know that I'm throwing because I love the game and love being there, and not mix the two. But nobody cared. It's I probably should have used it more now looking back on it, to get business,
right?
Because it's
Yeah. Could have been a big shot for clients. Here's what I do. I'll take you around. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Although maybe the Giants wouldn't have appreciated that. So maybe the fact that you didn't try to mix the jobs is one reason why you've lasted so long there. So
yeah, no, and you're right. And we'll never know. There's different, I made it through like, I don't know, 7 general managers,
yeah,
8 field managers, and everybody's got a unique kind of a deal. So yeah, it's what may have worked with one group may not have worked with the other group. So yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I know my position there. I don't try to act like I'm one of the players. I mean, even back when I was young enough to be one, I was there to kind of provide services, not be somebody's best friend or whatever. I mean, you get to know everybody, but I always never really kind of acted like I was more than what I am.
Are you looking at the probable pitchers far in advance to try to figure out, okay, might they have a lefty coming up? And these days, you never know. There's a lot of TBD, right? And a lot of openers. And so you can't always anticipate when there's going to be a lefty. So has it gotten harder for you to forecast when your services will be required? How far in advance do you know?
Another good question. Yeah, it's gotten a lot more difficult. It is. It used to be where people would set up their rotation 5 days in advance and they would announce it. Mm-hmm. And so, and then really the majority of the time in my career, that's the way it was. Really, since I guess probably COVID, another thing, call it 5 or 6 years, a lot of times they don't announce who's going to throw. And I won't find out until 2 days before I have to go, and sometimes even less. And so, the coaches typically will know when they'll say, well, I think it's going to be a left-hander, this is what they're going to do. They haven't announced it yet, but so I'll go ahead and get my plane ticket ready to go. And the West Coast is easy. It's Southwest typically, and you can cancel your ticket and get credit and put it towards another ticket. When it's East Coast, United Airline, it's you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. And so, but they've been good about that too, and they understand. And it hasn't happened all that much to where I just, they switch at last minute. But yeah, it's, I wish it was a lot more in advance, but I really don't know my schedule that much. And it wasn't not a big deal because I was home all the time or, whatever to just jump on a plane. I'd get used to it. Now it's a little bit, I want to kind of do other kind of travel and enjoy the fact that I'm 71 years old and shouldn't be tied to anything anymore. But, I love that. And so I want to be tied to it in a way, but in a way I want to be tied to it conveniently, and that doesn't always happen.
Wanted to ask you about your arm care routine, especially as you've gotten older. You mentioned you had the rotator cuff injury, so I guess it hasn't been pristine from a health standpoint, but what do you have to do to keep that arm in shape? Because sometimes I'll see a former player who throws out a first pitch, for instance, and it'll be kind of shocking that not that they're not firing it in there anymore, but that they can barely throw it, right? I saw, speaking of another lefty who actually ended his career with the Giants, Randy Johnson, he threw out a pitch for the Mariners in October, and he's 62, so you've got almost a decade on him, and he was standing well in front of the mound, and he still bounced it. And then afterward, he was kind of cranking his shoulder around and rubbing it, ruefully, kind of jokingly. And who threw harder and was more powerful than Randy Johnson? So I assume it's sort of a use it or lose it kind of thing that you got to stay in shape. So what do you do to prepare, and what do you do after you've thrown BP?
I've said that I can kind of throw all day long, every day. But I go out in the backyard and I bend over weeding the garden, and then I can't stand up the next day. I'm stiff and whatever. So it's what you get used to. But also I do, during the off season, I do this program called P90X, which is kind of an overall kind of a leg, arm, back, workout, and try to stay pretty loyal to that. So I'm staying in shape. And then, I really only am not throwing for now a month and a half during the year. And because I play in a men's senior league in end of October. So I keep my arm in shape doing that. And then, November and half of December, I don't throw. And then I start throwing here coming up in another couple of weeks. I'll be throwing against the wall or against a net or, whatever. My kids are growing up now and out. So I still throw with my younger boy, a little bit. But yeah, just, don't be stupid with it and try to throw as hard as you can without warming up. And, I have a little weight routine that I did after my rehab, from my shoulder surgery that I still use. And anybody listening that has arm problems, get it fixed and go to Ken Akazuki, who's a Giants orthopedic surgeon, and he was great. And, I never, again, knock on wood, had problems with my arm ever since. And so I give a lot of credit to him and just the fact that you got to pay attention to your body and, if it's stiff and sore, then you're probably not ready and you got to work out a little bit more. But once the season starts, I've been blessed on, really not having any issues. And I don't ice afterwards. I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore. So, yeah, but I think if I didn't throw for a year and I did something like Randy Johnson would do, I'm sure I'm going to have arthritis, bursitis, whatever in the arm, and I won't be able to lift it up at some point. So that's why I keep throwing, just to make sure that my arm is okay.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that the greatest threat to your tenure is not your own aging or health or some young hotshot batting practice pitcher prospect coming up, but technology. Because teams have evolved the way that they've done batting practice or have had machines do it. I think the Giants were one of the last teams to start using a Traject Arc machine. Maybe they didn't need one because they had you. I don't know. But there's been that trend where you have a machine that can actually replicate, mimic the movement of pitches, not on the field for now. You still have to go under the bowels of the stadium or wherever to hit against that. But between that and then the trend toward high-speed batting practice and game speed, not that you're just lobbing it in there, but, you might want to face the velocity that you're seeing in games. So has any of that seemed like a threat, or how does something like a Traject Arc work in concert with what you provide?
Well, again, compliments on your knowledge of the game, because not that many people know about the Traject machine. But
your nemesis.
They had it, down in spring training last year was the first time that we saw it. And it is good. I think they need to do it so that there is quicker time between pitches, because it's probably like 20, 25 seconds between pitches. And, in that period of time, I'll throw them 10 pitches, and obviously not that hard, not, everything else. But yeah, I think, whether it's that or, there's the pitching machines too. And, I don't throw 95 miles an hour, even, from 45 feet or whatever I'm throwing right now. And how that changes, what 80-mile-an-hour fastball becomes 95 if you're throwing from that distance, but it's all different. So from 60 feet, then they'll start using it more and more, I think. And, even the pitching machines, they do, but a pitching machine, they set it for a slider, and so you see 20 sliders and they go, okay, I'm done with the slider. I want a fastball. And then it takes them a while to adjust it. Some practice pitches, it's 2 or 3 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're in the batting cage ready to swing again, that's time. So they want to get in and out. Everybody's kind of got their pregame routine. And there are some guys that just want pitching machine. They don't want to see me. There's other guys that want to see, an arm and not a machine. And so that's just, I'm there to do what anybody wants at any given time. And, obviously no pressure to hit off me, but, you always wonder whether you're going to be replaced by some mechanical arm or not.
Yeah.
But so far it hasn't happened. And if it does, then, I've had a great career, but I think people still like to see an arm.
Well, we all worry about being replaced by robots in whatever our line of work is, I suppose. So, and they can't take a traject on the road, at least for now. It's too bulky. You can't put one on a plane, but you haven't been tempted to sabotage the machine yet, it sounds like.
No, but I pay attention to it and who does it. And they didn't, we've had it for a while, but it sat in the back of the cage. And so, it's more of a pain because it's a projector. And so the projector is put right where I throw, from, and it's a box that gets screwed down. And luckily they figured out a way to loosen the screws a little bit. And then you can kind of take it out of the grooves and pick it up and move it over off to the side. And then there's just the screws that are sticking up that you still have to kind of throw around. But whether it's me or Pat Burrell back then, or, whoever else was throwing batting practice, it was more of a hindrance than it was an advantage. And we'll see. I mean, they'll have it set up in spring training, and it's a different coach now, manager, different hitting, coach. Everything's changed for the Giants now this year. So we'll see whether, I think Buster Posey is a fan of it. And so that will make a difference, as well, especially with a new coach. You want to keep your general manager, president happy.
Was Buster a fan of you when he was a player and you were a batting practice pitcher? Because that would help
Buster
too.
Buster didn't really take batting practice off me that much, but he didn't take batting practice off of anybody. He had his, routine that he would do, which was soft toss, off of a tee. He was obviously a catcher, so he had a lot of stuff going on with the pitcher before the game. And, he was just one of those blessed, hardworking, but blessed individuals that didn't take a lot of batting practice. So Barry was my biggest advocate. And I think they were surprised when I came back the year after Barry in 2008. Barry was there until 2007. And, they're kind of surprised to see me again, thinking, I was Barry's guy. But, I had thrown for 8 years before Barry came onto the team as well, which I reminded him. And now I've been doing it for, 18 years after Barry's retired. So,
yeah, I do want to ask you about him in a second. But first, if you're willing to disclose, is there anyone who was the opposite, who you did not like throwing BP to for whatever reason? Maybe they complained about your pitching, or they just wanted some strange routine, or whatever it is.
Dan Gladden, early on, who was back in the 80s. And, he was just a complainer anyway. And so, I remember he was, I was throwing and he wasn't hitting the ball that hard. And he goes, this is, it's nothing like, whoever the pitcher was, I forget, that day throws, kind of disgusted. And he goes, you're not throwing hard enough. So he came up and I threw as hard as I could from 50 feet, which back then, I was 34 years old or whatever I was, I could still throw pretty hard, and especially from 50 feet. So, I think he never complained again anyway. I don't know whether I got more respect because of that outing or what. And then Kevin Mitchell, I called him Kevin Bitchell because he kind of always was complaining about something. But, and then now I'm, and that all ended too. There's nobody that really, was that way. And Jeff Kent was a unique personality. But, if they don't, I never tried to force myself. Certainly wasn't my position to do that, to throw to anybody or whatever. They either liked me or they didn't. And I guess there's enough people that did that I'm still doing it. And, the players have been good. You're there for them and they realize that. I'm not there for me. I kind of am, just because I love doing it, love the game, but you're really there to help them. And I've never, in my whole 42-year now career, ever told anybody I couldn't throw to them. So, there were guys that that were not starting that day, but wanted to see a left-hander because they would platoon later on in the game potentially. And so I would stay after the game started and throw to him in the cage for a while longer. And, people, there's typically a break from, the time that you're on the field to where, people start hitting in the cage because the home team hits first. And so I go up and have lunch, or dinner, I guess, in between. And some guys have, come into the lunchroom and ask me to throw. So I put my dinner aside and go throw to them. So, that's never really want to say, I want to end my career saying I've never told anybody I won't throw. So that's my goal.
Have you ever been called upon to do a home run derby?
No, Barry was in it once at home. And so, no, I'm really not that kind of a pitcher. There's a guy, Juan Lopez was his name, that was a right-hander who threw, batting practice as well. And, he didn't have a curve or slider or anything else like I throw in the cage. But on the field, he threw within a 3-inch diameter, everything was at the exact same spot every time. And so Barry had him throw to him, even though I kind of threw a lot to Barry. It was more, my ball moved a little bit. It wasn't always in the same spot. It was typically a strike, and I still throw like that. I'll throw, I aim for the middle, but sometimes it hits the inside of the plate, sometimes the outside of the plate, but still a strike. But that's not what home run derby is about. They wanted the same pitch every time.
Right. Yeah. You're too hard to hit, let's say, to be a home run derby pitcher. And I guess the Giants haven't had a whole lot of huge home run hitters since Bonds, but Bonds was the best of all time. So, I mean, he had a reputation for being prickly with people at times, certainly, and teammates, wasn't always the most beloved figure in the clubhouse. So how did you bond with Bonds?
Just by being there when he needed me and wanted me. And, he was so great to my family and, to me over the years. And, like I've told people when they ask me about him, I go, we're all, we all can be bitchy or whatever the word, not appropriate for a podcast is 10% of the time. Barry was just really good at it, and so that 10% that he wasn't friendly, he certainly wasn't friendly. And, it's tough. I was around him during some of those times, and you learn when to stay away from him. And majority of the time you didn't have to worry about it because he was good. And we became, good friends over the years. And so, but, it's just a different life for somebody like that because you get asked the same question over and over again, with people that, weren't there, hearing what Barry had said in one interview, and then 10 minutes later, somebody else would come up to him and ask him the same thing. And so, you just he was all about baseball, and it wasn't about, necessarily. And I think, if he had to do it again, he may change, but it was more go out and perform. And that's what people want to see. He wasn't there to make reporters feel good about themselves. And sometimes he was, it's just a moody thing. And like I said, Barry, at 10% of the time that he was in his bad mood, he was good at it.
And in 2007, the New York Times talked to you when he was chasing the record, and you said that you had given up more home runs to Barry Bonds than he had hit in games to that point. What was your usual routine with him? What did he have you do?
So we would typically play games. So, I'd throw to him just regular batting practice. And, he was, a lot of the good hitters, they always did the same thing. Will Clark's and whatever, they would take the first few pitches the opposite way. So they kind of get that hand-eye coordination and bat coordination and, hit it the opposite way. And then they would, hit it straight up the middle, and then they would pull it. And, you'd see him working on things like that. And so Barry would go through, that routine. And then, we played a game. And so he spotted me a strike, and, I'd throw as hard as I could. And, then we would, have we went anywhere from 1 inning to 9 innings, depending on how he felt that day and what he was working on. And so it was good because I got to be the umpire as well as the pitcher. So, he crushed a couple and I never let him get too far ahead, and so, he'd crush a couple and I go, oh, it's a fly ball to left field, and I go, what do you mean? That was halfway up the upper deck. I go, don't argue with me. I'm the umpire as well. So yeah, we played 3 outs. So, never struck him out. But we'd start with 1 strike and then, keep score.
And could you see the evolution in him as a hitter? Because when he got to the Giants, he was already the best player in baseball. He was the MVP that first season. But then, of course, he became the best player ever. However that happened, I'm sure that you saw the physical transformation, but also as a hitter, he just reached a higher plane of existence, whether he had help doing that or not. The fact is he was the best ever to step into a batter's box in some of those years. So did that manifest itself in batting practice also?
I don't know that he became better in batting practice. I think he became even better as time went on, and all the speculation on what Barry did or didn't do. What that did is it's not something you take and all of a sudden you get big and stronger. It's something that again he may or may not have taken that you got to work out, and it helps you to recover quicker and work out harder. And Barry worked out harder than anybody I've ever seen. I mean, he was there after games, lifting, before games, lifting. He had his own weight guy that was there, helping him and doing all that. So he worked as hard as anybody that I've ever seen, harder than anybody I've ever seen in the game. So, that's that. And it's like, I'm pretty convinced Barry would have had, again, if that thing was there, he would have the same number of home runs, because it wasn't like, Barry hit a lot of home runs in the first row, and as he got stronger and bigger, he would hit them 40 rows up. And if he wasn't stronger and bigger, he still would have hit the ball, home run, in the first 5 rows or whatever it may have been. But he was, I would like to see what the stats were of anything, where Barry saw 5 pitches or more in an at-bat, what his batting average was. And I'm guessing it was, a lot higher than what his career was, just because he would then kind of know the pitches, have that feeling of the timing of each pitch, know how it broke, know the arm angle that he was throwing, so that, he could kind of not guess, but probability of where his arm angle was at being a slider and being ready for that pitch. Barry was great at. He would, whether it's true or not, I remember he told me the story, because he would like call my pitches, and he's going, "You're throwing a slider, you're throwing," and I go, "How do you see that?" He goes, "Well, it's all the arm angle. I look at something in the outfield, and when you're looking at something that far away, the arm angle that you use gets magnified by that distance. And if you drop down a little bit on your slider, it's 5 feet difference out in center field. There's the way that the geometry works." And so, he used that to determine what the pitcher was throwing as well. But he never got fooled, and he was always on balance. And, that's the thing that, whether I throw him a changeup at 50 miles an hour or a fastball at 80 miles an hour, he was just never fooled. Mm-hmm. So, and always on balance.
And he has spoken very highly of you. He said in one article, "I needed John. There's no question he was a huge part of my career." That's pretty high praise coming from a player that accomplished. And it's a good thing that you did stay on after Bonds departed, because the Giants then went on to win 3 World Series, and you got 3 World Series rings. What do you do with your rings? Do you ever wear them? Where do you keep them for safety's sake?
Well, one of them now is with one of my best friends that I went to high school with, and he went to Stanford with me and played pro ball and everything too. And now he's retired from his main job in substitute teaching to stay busy. And so he took one of Barry's bats and one of my World Series rings and had a show and tell, at the school that he was teaching at. And so, that's what they're for, and when I don't, I keep them in the safe, and so they're just too big. I mean, I'm a skinny little guy, and these rings are big. So if you're an NFL lineman, they would all probably be proportionate. On me, it looks like, it's out of place a little bit. But I did my share of wearing them, each year when we got them, and then they've been kind of my own show and tell. When people come over and ask about it, then I'll show them and all that. But yeah, most of the time they're locked up.
Do you have any idea who the next oldest or longest tenured batting practice pitcher around the league is? Is there a fraternity of batting practice pitchers, or do you communicate? Do you know if anyone has this sort of track record that you do?
There's nobody that's kind of independent that's not a coach that have done it. There was a guy down in Los Angeles, Bonaforte was his last name, that stopped throwing probably 6 or 7 years ago, but he'd done it for a long, long time as well. I mean, 30 plus years. And he was left-handed as well. And then, he kind of had arm problems and, whatever. So then he stopped. But the coach, I can't remember his name right now, and he'd been with Oakland A's, and he's 75 years old. And he throws batting practice. So, on the field. And so, yeah, he's got me by age and is still doing it. But to kind of have an independent job or an independent person come out, yeah, Giants have been great. I mean, I appreciate every time I step on the field. And, a lot of times I've thought, okay, well, maybe this will be my last year, as I'm driving up there and for the first time, and you're wondering if you're ready, and you're just going, okay, it's the same thing year after year, and maybe this is it. And then you step out on the field and you go, no, that's not it. I love it. And so, just green grass and, just outdoor, and, it's just something that I'm blessed to have been able to do.
Well, it's funny, in your minor league career, I guess you probably could have hung on a little longer than you did if you'd wanted to, but you've more than made up for it in this second pitching career. You're now very much a tear the uniform off me kind of guy, it seems like, and I hope they don't anytime soon, and that Tony Vitello and his staff appreciate what you bring, and that your arm holds up, and that you can keep fighting off the robots and the machines and throw BP for many years to come. Thanks so much, John. This was fascinating.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, do you think I have some updates for you? Yes, I have some updates for you. First, on the pitcher warp draft. I have some facts. I have some figures. One little thing, the warp totals that Chris cited at the start of the episode were for those pitchers we drafted in 2015 through 2025, as he subsequently realized that 10-year period should have ended in 2024. That's 10 seasons, including 2015. However, that does not change the results. Sam still won, according to the current model of warp, 63.7 wins above replacement player to 60.9. Pretty close. And because I had to know, I looked up how we would have done if we had gone by FanGraphs WAR instead of Baseball Prospectus warp. Of course, we were a Baseball Prospectus podcast at the time. Now we're a FanGraphs podcast. If we were doing this today, we'd probably use FanGraphs WAR. Well, by FanGraphs WAR, my 2015 draftees won 73.1 WAR to 71.6. So by old warp, I would have been the winner. By FanGraphs WAR, I would have been the winner, but by present warp, Sam won. Now, we wondered aloud which pitchers we should have drafted back in 2015 and how well we could have done if we had had an ideal draft, so Chris and I figured that out. If we had both drafted perfectly, each taking the best person available, I would have won 109.5 to 97.2, and if one of us had picked the best 10 candidates available, anyone who was 24 or younger and active in the majors when we drafted drafted in early May 2015, they would have earned 162.1 warp. And actually, we did a little bit better than I thought, because if we had drafted ideally, I said we would have had 109.5 and 97.2 warp. So with 63.7 and 60.9, we were more than halfway there. The pitchers we overlooked and should have drafted: Kevin Gausman, Marcus Stroman, Robbie Ray, Carlos Rodon, Andrew Heaney, Mike Foltynewicz, Felipe Vasquez, Jose Urena, Ken Giles, and Corey Knebel. Sorry we snubbed you guys. But according to the Effectively Wild wiki page for that episode, quote, Ben and Sam agree that the crop of under 25 starters is not very deep this year, and many of them have injury concerns. So maybe we didn't do that badly. It was just a weak class. Also, in case you're wondering, I did find out what happened to Tim Cooney and what he's up to today. He made 6 starts for St. Louis in the majors in 2015. That's the entirety of his big league career. He then went to Cleveland. He retired as a player after the 2017 season. And what did he do next? He went to business school. Unlike John Yandel, he earned his MBA from Wharton, no less. Class of 2020. He went to work for McKinsey, for almost 4 years. And now he is a corporate strategy senior specialist at Vanguard. I guess he landed on his feet. I also have a follow-up to something John said. He said he'd like to know what Barry Bonds' batting average was when he saw 5 or more pitches. And John said he figured that Barry's batting average would be higher in those plate appearances than it was overall. Well, you know I had to check on that, with some help from Michael Mountain. We have pitch-by-pitch data going back to 1988, almost all of Bonds' career, but not quite. Michael found 4,053 plate appearances from 1988 through Bonds' last season, 2007, in which he saw 5 or more pitches. The slash line was 253, 501, 539. Obviously, 5+ pitch plate appearances, we're going to get a lot of walks, even more so than usual for Bonds, so we're mostly interested in the batting average and slugging percentage, 253, 539, and Bonds' career batting average and slugging percentage were 298 and 607, so considerably worse in the 5+ pitch plate appearances than overall. But then I wondered, okay, well, what about the rest of the league? Did the average batter get much worse in those situations? Well, from 1988 through 2007, National League, the median average was 260 on the dot with a 411 slugging percentage, 5+ pitch plate appearances, 217 batting average, and 344 slug. So again, Bonds was 298 versus 253 and 607 versus 539. The league was 260 versus 217 and 411 versus 344. So Bonds' drop-offs in those plate appearances, 15.1% for his batting average and 11.2% for his slugging percentage. The league as a whole, 16.5% for the batting average versus 15.1 for Bonds, and 16.3% for the slugging percentage versus 11.2 for Bonds. So he declined less than average. Of course he did. He was Barry Bonds, and he declined notably less than average in his extra base hit ability. So this does turn out to be another way to show that Barry Bonds was a good hitter, but the results might surprise John. I think the reason why the batting average and slugging percentage are lower in those plate appearances is that seeing 5+ pitches means a lot of 2-strike counts, and that's going to drag down your numbers. Michael looked just at bats ending with a 3-ball count, and the numbers were still a little bit below Bonds' average and the league's average. So kind of counterintuitive, but now we know. Bonds didn't have a huge times through the order effect, for what it's worth. 1,058 OPS his first time facing a starter in a game, then 1,103 the second time, 1,069 the third time, 977 the fourth time. He was just a great hitter, however you slice it. There have been a bunch of small transactions since the last time we potted. Maybe we'll do a roundup next week, depending on how much major news there is coming out of the winter meetings. A smattering of free agents signed: Cedric Mullins, Miguel Rojas, Emilio Pagan, Anthony Kay, and we had a Red Sox-Pirates trade, with Password going to the Pirates and Johan Oviedo going to Boston. Kudos to that unnamed exec in the Jesse Rogers ESPN survey we discussed the other day, who said that the top trade candidate of the winter was a Pirate starter. Nailed it. A Pirate starter has been traded. To me, maybe the most interesting signing was the Rockies hiring Josh Burns as their new GM, serving under Paul DePodesta. In a way, it's another blast from the past. Not as distant a past last as Depot, but Burns was the GM of the Diamondbacks from 2005 to 2010 and the Padres from 2011 to 2014. However, unlike DePodesta, Burns has not been out of baseball. In fact, he's been with the Dodgers since 2014 as their senior vice president of baseball operations. He's overseen their scouting, their farm system. Seems like a good guy to have around if you're trying to catch up on what has happened in baseball in the past decade and you're trying to learn from the best, get your scouting and your player development and your prospects up to speed. Plus, you get to poach a front office talent from a division rival. Seems like a suitable right-hand man, and perhaps encouraging that the Rockies were able to persuade someone from the Dodgers to work for them. He also was previously the Rockies AGM 25 years ago or so. Just needs to work for the Giants to complete the NL West circuit. Lastly, 'tis the season for year-end podcast listening stats, Spotify, Wrapped, and others. Thanks to all of you who have sent us your stats, who have posted them and tagged us. It's always gratifying to see how much time people have spent listening to the podcast, though I gotta say, some of you are sickos, which I appreciate. But based on what I've seen, it seems like listening to every episode we publish this year gets you only into the top 3 or 4% of listeners, which means that a considerable number of you have not only listened to every new episode as it's come out, but also listened to some old ones or listened to some multiple times. We always do well in these things because we put out a lot of episodes. I don't know if you've noticed, and also they tend to be fairly lengthy like this one, but some of you have listened to Effectively Wild for a significant percentage of the year. I think the top number I've seen so far, listener Jack Alexander posted in the Facebook group, 44,823 minutes, which makes him a top 0.1% fan. Considering it's still early December, that's what, 9% of the year, something like that, spent listening to Effectively Wild. However, in the comments, he did disclose that he sometimes listens when he sleeps. Can you actually listen when you sleep? You can put the podcast on as you're falling asleep. We have no problem with people using Effectively Wild as a sleep aid, but we might have to discount that minutes total just slightly. Those are garbage time minutes. That's some low leverage listening. Minutes consciously listened. That's probably the metric we would want. Listener Dan Enden is a top 1% listener, 15,224 minutes. If those were all minutes while he was awake, maybe that's a more legitimate total. Look, asleep, awake, old episodes, new episodes, 1 times speed, 3 times speed. We'll take it. We're happy to have the support. And we're especially happy to have the support on Patreon, which you can confer on us by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Patrick Britton, Raleigh Richards, Matthew Feary, Chris Dyer, and Christine Gu. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, personalized messages, discounts on merch, and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and other podcast platforms. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can check the show page in the podcast post at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. One link is to sign up for Effectively Wild Secret Santa, which you can do until December 10th. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. That will do it for today and for this week. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back to talk to you early next week.
#1 FanGraphs baseball podcast. It's StatCast and Stat Blast. TOPS Plus when the stats need contrast. Zips and steamer for the forecast. Coming in hot, big boss on a hovercraft. No notes, minor league free agent draft. Burn the ships, flames jumping for a nav. Cow FEMA, boning on the bat shaft. Megan's on the buck beat, never say your hot seat. Games are always better with the pivot table spreadsheet. No ads, subscribers will support us. Vroom, vroom, fast on your slog to rigor mortis. Rest in peace, Sam. Rest in peace, Jeff.